What is going on, guys? I hope you guys are doing fantastic. I hope you're having a good day. Today, I am joined with the author of You Are Not Broken, Brooke Hazen. Brooke, how are you today, sir?
Oh, I'm fine. How are you doing, CJ?
Hey, I'm doing fantastic, man. And, I like your vibe. And like we were already talking about before about how there's a lot of things right now that currently don't make a whole lot of sense
Hmm.
in regards to not just sexual function, but just I kind of feel like medicine right now is starting to fail us a little bit in that they try to pigeonhole us all to believe that things should be a certain way. But through your experience and through what you've lived and what you've studied, you've come out the other side learning a whole bunch more about the fact that these things aren't as black and white. But if you could just jump into a little bit of your backstory and just tell us a little bit more about your background.
Sure. Yeah. Before that, I just want to have a special message to the men out there. Today our focus is on masculine health solutions,
Mhm.
and I want to say it's perfectly fine. No need to worry anymore. I have solutions for ED and for maximizing our masculine health, but it's perfectly fine to be vulnerable. And when you talk about sex. Um, In fact, God wants us to talk about sex. We don't realize that, but God absolutely wants us to talk about sex. Not only that, but to realize the enormous power behind our sexual behavioral decisions that can either cause massive dysfunction in all aspects of our lives or massive transformation. Now, men tend to cling to these ideas of what it means to be a man. But when we break it down into the science, we see that they're not in a these behavior choices are not in alignment with optimizing masculine health. And this is on purpose. We actually I'm going to go through we actually can see that this is really because so much of what our behaviors are based on is from corporate mantras, marketing mantras.
Yeah.
And corporations like the massive industries of Western medicine, pharmaceutical, pornography industry, and insurance industries are the richest on earth. And they profit off us being imbalanced, in dysfunction, and in disease. That's how they make their money. As soon as we get empowered and we regain our health, they don't make any money off us. Now, I've identified four massive 10-ton elephants in the room that represent holistic cures and preventions for ED, as well as the dysfunctions plaguing our society today. The first one is pornography. We're at the end of a massive experiment for 2 decades on the minds and neurology of the global population. And
Yeah.
the results are in, and the results are terrifying and harrowing. We're seeing an entire generation of young men, virgins, who are unable to have the first sexual experience of their lives and unable to connect in any meaningful way in a relationship. Pornography, this is the fastest growing segment of ED today, which is porn-induced erectile dysfunction. We'll be getting into that. But pornography is destroying neurology, relationships, and leaving men impotent. Now, the second elephant in the room we're going to talk about is semen retention. Now, semen release. This is something that I believe in the West where the most misconceptions and myths around. But in the East, they've been aware for millennia of the incredible transformative powers of retaining our semen for all aspects of our life, not only for sexual potency, but physical fitness, physical potency overall, as well as our relationships, and even our minds, even our mental and emotional faculties. It covers everything. Now, the third elephant in the room I want to talk about that nobody's looking at, that can cause so many cures for us today that we're ignoring, that we need to look at, is meat, an animal-based diet. Now, men, they're perfect at marketing, at mimicking the marketing mantras and jingles of these corporations, especially when it comes to an animal-based diet. We think meat, it makes strong men. Men eat meat. Milk, it makes strong bones. But when we hold it up to the science, we see the opposite. We see that eating an animal-based diet within hours, short term, and then even mid and long term, we're seeing that it makes our lingam soft. And we see with milk that it's actually creating male breasts. And
Yeah.
long term, this is causing ED and arteriosclerosis. And we'll be delving into that more in depth. But the fourth elephant in the room is arteriosclerosis. It's something that Western mainstream medicine does not want us to know, that I've found a cure, that we've had a cure for decades for arteriosclerosis, which is blood flow induced ED also. It's the same thing. Physical and sexual are inseparable. But the Western mainstream medicine makes billions of dollars. It's the largest grossing pharmaceutical in world history, just before now the COVID vaccine, was statins. And they absolutely do not want us to know about these curative modalities that we have, that is holistic and it's preventative, because Western mainstream medicine, they really profit off us continuing to be sick. It's a sick care system. Mm-hmm. So we're going to leave all that behind. We need to start looking out for ourselves, because our interest is optimizing our male sexual health, and we need to look at the science, and we need to start making decisions that we research and that we know optimize that health, and disregard and throw out anything that we're hearing from others.
Yeah.
And I do want to get into my story, but I wanted to give you a chance to talk.
No, I like that. I mean, we'll definitely, because as far as it was interesting, because I saw this one psychologist who actually brought up, and she was trying to debate the fact that she's like, there's no such thing as porn addiction. And I was like, how could you possibly say that when there's a generation of young boys who are growing up with cell phones and they're seeing this instantaneously, man? Like back in the day, and that's kind of where, I laugh at this, because back in the day, man, we would sit there and wait for the 5 minutes while our dial-up would slowly start to show the picture of the naked woman, and we were that committed to it. And nowadays it's instant. So now you basically got heroin addicts with heroin available with their cell phones, anytime they want. And it's strange because it's different. It's like a hydra almost, where we got different heads of this, dragon or tentacles basically going out and screwing us up from different angles. And it's interesting that, you're right. They are four different elephants. They are tied into everything that we do. And I think you banged on the head, and I can't wait to get into those subjects with you. But yeah, give us a little bit of your backstory too, as to what led you to find all this out.
Okay, well, it started out several years ago as an absolute nightmare of my own doing. It was my own choices, which I was misled by, as we all are, by Western culture and these massive industries. But basically, it became the most unbelievable, unexpected, beautiful journey I could have never imagined, which was, several years ago, I started experiencing the symptoms of erectile dysfunction. And I dislike using that word, erectile dysfunction, because it really creates this feeling of disempowerment around it, when nothing could be further from the truth. We are fully empowered to cure ED, all forms of ED. In fact, in my book, I have For You Today, and in my book, which is available on my own YouTube channel as free audiobook and different podcasts like this, I provide simple, easy, clear, and concise solutions for all three types of ED, including the one we're most familiar with, which is organic ED. Nobody else is really doing this right now. Nobody is talking about all three forms of ED. And not only that, but nobody's providing a real cure for organic ED. Even the natural supplement field is simply mimicking the same, hologram, same techniques that pharmaceutical ED meds are doing, which is boosting the nitric oxide system. But they're not getting to the root cause of nitric oxide dysfunction. I do that. So we're providing cures now. We have these cures. Anyways, at the time I was going through this, I was terrified and disempowered. And I didn't have these techniques I have now. I was completely on my own. So I reached out to Western mainstream medicine. And of course, they prescribed me the one tool they have, only one tool they have for all forms of ED, which is blood flow inducing ED meds, pharmaceuticals. Yeah. And it's actually targets just a small function of our body, which is the endothelial layer, and it provides only short-term effect. It artificially boosts our nitric oxide production to all parts of our body. We can't just isolate our body to just the lingam and the sexual areas of our body. It's all interconnected. So what we experience is, induced blood flow to our heart, our muscles, our brain, and that's what causes the debilitating side effects. And because it's so short-term, we're dependent on it every time we want to have sex. So I was actually discovered later I had porn-induced ED, which is a neurologically based form of ED. This is not a cardiovascular issue. I did not have a blood flow issue. Maybe we can all work on that when we're young, but, and we can prevent and we can enhance, and some people have arteriosclerosis. We can cure that. But I didn't have a blood flow issue, and millions of Americans and people are being prescribed blood flow inducing medications when they have neurological and energetic based ED from their habits. And this is actually the very definition of malpractice, because this can cause low blood pressure and can create serious illness or death.
Yeah, side effects.
This is malpractice, but this is the only tool that Western medicine has. So anyways, I was going through all this. I was going through so many burdens I was carrying at once. And I know that millions of men are carrying these enormous burdens right now. Millions are carrying this. And that's why I wrote this book. We're carrying several different burdens. One of them is the scarlet letter of erectile dysfunction, which is overbearing. It causes humiliation, confusion, and desperation. And then we have these perpetual dopamine crashes of our addiction to pornography and semen release, with the corresponding mood imbalance, fatigue, and distancing in the relationship. And now we have this added unnecessary burden of pharmaceutical EDs, which cause the debilitating side effects and all the desperation around trying to make that work when it doesn't actually work in most cases. So at the time I was going through all of this, and I was terrified. I was confused. I was looking down the throat of possibly never having a natural, vibrant sexual function again in my mind. That's what I thought, because Western medicine was failing me. And I was praying to God for either a pharmaceutical or a natural medicine which could work and not cause side effects. But that prayer never got answered, and for good reason, because God had so much more in store for me than simply settling for a lifetime prescription of pharmaceutical ED medications every time I wanted to have sex. It was so disempowering, but that's what I was praying for. But as this process closed out on me, I was falling into a depression for weeks at a time. I didn't know what was going to happen, if I would ever be able to have sex in a meaningful way again, naturally for sure, and so confused. So it was a scary time for me, because I didn't know when or if I would even pull out of these depressions for weeks at a time. When I finally tried the last drug and it failed me, I was at the end of the road. I had no idea where to go. I didn't have the benefits of what I know now. It was just myself alone, if you can imagine. And just myself and God. And so I prayed to God. This time I let completely go and put all my faith in a healing miracle. And I prayed to God for the healing miracle over and over. It was at that point, when I let go completely, that God decided I was ready to embark on my journey, and set me off on a journey of natural healing, growth, and learning, and massive transformation of not only raising my sexual performance to the highest levels I could ever imagine, but also my overall physical fitness and physical health in my relationships, and showed me how they're all interconnected. They're not separate, as Western medicine wants us to believe. And this letting go is completely integral to what I'm trying to teach in my book. And right now, letting go of our fears, which are enormous blocks for us, of the myths and misconceptions, the addictions, the negative habits, and the peer pressure that comes from family, friends, culture, society, and especially corporations. And by letting go of this and letting go of our addiction to pornography and semen release, we're able to allow the natural healing light of God to enter into our hearts, our body, our minds once again that we've been blocking, and for the innate intelligence that's in every cell of our body to fulfill its mandate of restoring perfect balance and health. And, I'll never forget when God led me to that first miracle. I will be eternally grateful for that. And now I know why God led me to that. It's so clear. God wanted me and for all of us to understand that by balancing our neurology, by building up our dopamine levels, building up our chi sexual energy by refraining from pornography and semen release is the foundation. It's the launching pad for massive transformation on every level and unlocking the unlimited potential of our mind. And I'll get into this further, how these two are actually the most powerful biohacks that we are on the planet. And we're just not aware of that. We don't talk about that, but my mission today is to show you that these two are the foundation. They're the biohacks that can launch us into vibrant sexual health, vibrant physical health, vibrant relationships, vibrant mental faculties, vibrant emotions.
Yeah.
And success in life, in all areas of our life.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because it's almost like we got to go into these deep, dark valleys in order to figure this stuff out. There's no way around it. It's almost like you got to experience a little bit of pain sometimes to really be motivated. But I think that's where humanity tends to progress the most. That's where we become the most creative as well. And that's where we really start to explore. It's like, okay, I run out of the options that they've given me. I better go do something for myself now. And I'm not going to rely on what they told me because, well, you know what? That's just not doing it for me anymore. And it's interesting to see that this is almost like your own hero's journey is the way I see it. And this is what you came back with and the knowledge that you have. And it's almost one of those situations where, you know what, that knowledge was always there, but it wasn't until you experienced what you had to go through where all of a sudden now it's like they took the blinders off and you're like, okay, I'm going to go on my own path and I'm going to go blaze my own trail and I'm going to go into the world that is quote unquote unknown. But now that you've found it, you've come back with all that knowledge. The first thing, there's a million different questions or a million different ways we can go from here, but what was the first book or what was the first thing? Because you mentioned Qigong, well, Qi a little bit there, but what led you down the road of semen retention initially?
So, the first miracle that God led me to was Your Brain on Porn by Gary Wilson, that website.
Oh, yeah.
And I highly recommend that. It explains the neurology behind porn-induced erectile dysfunction. But I also was starting to connect the dots to relationships and semen release, semen retention, when I started studying Tantra, Tao, and Karetsa, as well as Marnia Robinson's book, Cupid's Poison Arrow, who she wrote a review for my book, and we're friends and touch base now. But yeah, anyways, what you and I have, we all have the power to do this. Just because someone has a white lab coat and a title absolutely does not mean that they have the power over you. It's our own bodies, and we actually have to start looking out for ourselves. The only growth happening right now is with ourselves and with naturopaths, because Western medicine has stopped growing. They only focus on pharmaceuticals and surgeries. That's it. There's two programs they have, pharmaceuticals and surgeries, but there's no holistic, curative, and preventative modalities that they practice at all. You'll never get it. But what I've discovered in this beautiful process was through my own trials and my own research, exhaustive research, once I was blessed to be given this foundation of quitting pornography and semen retention, it all started opening up to me. And I discovered over time that there are 3 different kinds of ED. We're not aware of this, and it's on purpose. Western medicine doesn't want us to know that there's neurologically based ED, which is porn-induced ED. We're going to delve into that. And then and it's also an arousal displacement, arousal dysfunction, really. It's neurological. It has to do with our brain, with dopamine. Well, they don't have a drug for that. So of course they have no idea what's happening with this fastest growing form of ED, which is neurological and energetic. And that's the second form of ED is it's interlinked. It's energetic, has to do with releasing our semen too often. And this causes a depletion in our chi sexual energy, which is our overall physical energy too. And this causes where we just can't perform well sexually, just simply by releasing our semen too often. And usually this combined with porn, so it goes together, but it's actually separate. This is an energetic physical source of ED, which we're unaware of in the West, but in the East, they guard it like gold, like wisdom. And then the third one is the one we're hyper focused on, and that's organic ED. And that's on purpose too, because Western mainstream medicine and the pharmaceutical industries want us to be in fear and to believe that they have that solution for us, which is one little pill that you can take that's going to somehow resolve the issues. But that's not the way it works. It doesn't cure anything. We need to be clear about that. Taking a pharmaceutical drug is only meant to be a short-term fix and hardwire. It has no curative powers. The only cure comes from within. In fact, we're so empowered with the first two forms of ED, which I've found are the predominant forms of ED today, which is porn-induced ED, which is neurological, and then energetic ED from releasing our semen. We're actually fully empowered. In fact, we are the only power that can resolve those first two forms of ED. Nobody else can do it for us. Even if we want to give away our power, it's up to each one of us to make that ultimate decision inside of our own hearts and souls to search and to quit that addiction to pornography and semen release. And we'll get into that, how it's in total illusion that men are clinging to pornography, thinking that they're gaining so much. When it's a mirage. We're actually losing everything. You're losing your arousal to sex, to partners, to life, and you're repelling women because you're losing your magnetism. And women sniff that out. They can tell when someone is lacking drive, lacking energy, lacking magnetism, and they're going to run the other way. So we're actually doing the opposite of what we think we're doing. We're actually getting less satisfaction when we release our semen too much. We're numbing ourselves and we're performing less well.
Yeah.
So we'll get into PIED next, but I want to give you a chance again to engage here.
Yeah, well, no, I completely agree. I kind of feel like, plus when it comes to the porn, it's like, dude, you're burning out of all that dopamine ASAP, it's just like constantly. And for myself, I guess, because like I said, when I first saw it, it was like a matchbox or something. Or, the first set of titties I saw, and I was like, oh, wow, I held on to that matchbox for a while. I was like 6 or 7. But going back to like where we are now as a society, it's like now a 6, 7-year-old kid's got a cell phone, man, a cell phone. He's got the world at his fingertips. So that's probably why I think, neurologically, they're going to be just burnt out, man. Like it's almost like what I found arousing is almost going to be like nothing for these kids because it's just going to become more and more extreme. And it's almost like anything else. It's like, well, I'm numb to that. Give me something more extreme so I can just take it to the next level, which kind of worries me because, if they're starting out at what I thought was fourth base back in the day, what's going to happen to these kids in 10, 20 years, right? But going back to the PID, jump into more into how I would love to hear more about how, it's really affecting the brain and why it's wreaking havoc in the way that it is, the processes behind it, I guess.
Yeah, so porn-induced erectile dysfunction, the fastest growing form of ED today, is a neurologically based form of ED. It has to do with the dopamine receptors and levels in our brain, which is it's a neurotransmitter and it's a hormone. It has to do with arousal. So dopamine, by definition, is our drive, our determination, our motivation, our will to become the ideal beings that we're truly meant to be. It's what moves us every day. It's integral, essential, and that's why God puts so much emphasis on it. And our chi sexual energy is our life force. It's the energy that moves through us, not only sexually, but physically. These two together are powerhouses of our life. In fact, we don't talk about neurology enough, but we depend on our neurology for dopamine to get aroused and to continue to engage sexually during intercourse. It's integral to that, but it's on purpose again. Western medicine doesn't want to talk about this, but it's also a dopamine addiction. And it's no joke here. The science is showing that the dopamine levels and receptors are depleted to the same low levels experienced by cocaine and morphine addicts. So this is a definite addiction, and we're not talking about that. That's another elephant in the room, that we're not recognizing this is an addiction. And it's actually combined for two reasons. This is a super stimulus. Well, first of all, I want to say our brain actually cannot differentiate between a physical addiction to a drug and a neurological addiction to the super stimulus of pornography. And the reason pornography is such a super stimulus, like you mentioned, it's the constant novelty at our fingertips that we're able to control and manipulate what arouses us specifically to our own neural pathways, in combination with, and this is important, semen release. That's the one that makes it a super stimulus that's combined together. And I say semen release on purpose because I'm not using the word ejaculation, because we can still have ejaculation. In higher level Tantra, there is what's called full body orgasm ejaculation without semen release. All we're doing is we're simply blocking the semen from being released. And I've actually found the best way to do that I recommend for listeners is to practice the Kegel exercises, which is used as a monotherapy for mild ED. And that'll actually, during the process of lovemaking, you can pull out, slow it down, prolong the experience, get more fully embodied. But when you get to that point of no return, you just clamp down on those PC muscles with the Kegel exercise, and that'll keep that semen from going out. But we're unaware in the West. We're trained to believe that releasing our semen is the way to go. But in the East, they're aware of this, that the immense toll that takes place on a man the moment that semen is released. There's this intense neurological, physical, and mental refractory period and process of replenishment that takes place the moment semen is released, where dopamine levels crash and prolactin levels rise. Prolactin is linked with hair loss and fatigue.
Wow.
Yeah. And this process causes fatigue, mood imbalances, irritabilities, and distancing in the relationship. And this process happens because the body goes into lockdown mode and pulls all the most precious resources of growth factors, hormones, and nutrients to replace that vital sperm. That's its sole goal. And this process is most intense for the first few days, but actually continues for up to 2 weeks. Science shows that it weaves up and down for up to 2 weeks, with some of the largest reverberations still taking place at the 2-week level. Now, as porn users, we're aware that since 80% of men watch pornography weekly and 26% of women watch it weekly, we're aware that the majority of men are releasing their semen to pornography more than once every 2 weeks, more likely once every few days at a minimum, but probably more likely once every day, or even sometimes on special events, we'll have it multiple times per day. What this does is it causes a perpetual crash where we have chronic levels of chronic fatigue, mood imbalance, anger, irritability, and a total inability to connect in a relationship or really in life in general during those periods, which are overlapping, which becomes a perpetual state at that point. I didn't realize I was living in a perpetual state of chronic fatigue and mood imbalance for decades until I actually quit it. And we're not aware until we quit this addiction. But the brain is fascinating. The brain cannot tell the difference between a real live connected partner and the pixels on a screen. This may be subconscious. We think it's fantasy, but the brain thinks it's real. The brain actually believes it is mating, this mating behavior. It is spreading maximum genetic diversity with a wide range of novel new mates. And so we actually are fully occupied in this endeavor on every level. We believe that we're, and what this does, I have to talk to men right now that, as I mentioned before, we're actually distancing ourselves from our partners, and we're desensitizing ourselves from not only our partner, but our favorite. It eventually escalates to where we cannot not even get aroused to our favorite pornographic material. And eventually we're completely impotent to sex as well as life. We can't get aroused to any of it. And it's an escalating thing. We're actually, every time we release our semen to pornography, our dopamine levels, due to the loud noise of the superstimulus, the levels and receptors are canceled out lower and lower and lower every time we release that semen to pornography. And we actually are forced every time to get that same level of satisfaction. We chase our tail in order to get the same hit, dopamine hit. We're forced to escalate. And this further causes desensitization, but we're forced to escalate to material that is increasing in content and can actually violate a lot of our own standards from within. So it's incredibly powerful, and it links with semen retention, which we'll talk about next.
Yeah, I mean, you got knowledge bomb after knowledge bomb there.
Well, I've been working on it, man. I'm passionate about it.
No, I could tell it. It is a lot to extrapolate, though. And the biggest thing for me that I keep going back to, it's like, even for myself, man, like, it's hard for people to let go of these things because it's almost like it's been woven into your daily lifestyle, man. And I mean, it was interesting because you're like, oh yeah, once a week. I'm like, man, dude, try talking to guys that are in their hotel rooms working on a project somewhere in the middle of nowhere. It's like 4 times a day. And I remember because I was working in the middle of nowhere, Canada, like honestly, population like 500. And it's like we're either working at the gym or in the hotel room doing a whole lot of nothing. And I would talk to some of the guys there, and it was just like, bro, I don't want to go and jerk off again. You talk to these guys and it's like 4 or 5 times a day. It's to the point where it's just like, you could see it on their faces. Like, I'm worn out, and I don't enjoy this. But I'm going to do it again tonight anyways.
It's an addiction. Yeah.
Yeah. Where it's just like, it's like a junkie who's going for a hit that's not doing anything. It's almost like just chasing the dragon. And it's funny.
We got to be honest, man. This is an addiction, and it's the same as that same cycle of drug addiction and alcohol addiction. The same behaviors.
It is, man. And that's kind of where it bugs me, because people aren't, well, not people, because we go back to the fact that, it's all up to us. If it's to be, it's up to me kind of thing, right? Because at the end of the day, nobody can save you. Nobody's going to save you. And it's almost like we have to do some, good self-reflection, just come to the realization that, hey, in order for me to level up in this life, I got to get rid of this habit. I got to kick this habit. And I think
we also got to change what we think is macho, is masculine. It's 100%. Not masculine.
No, but on the bright side, what I am seeing though, in regards to changes, like I'm seeing the no fat movement starting to become a bigger thing. I'm starting to see more guys talk about semen retention, not just like here, but obviously with what you've experienced in life. And more of us are just like, I'm tired. I'm looking for answers, right? But at the same time, I feel like society, TV, and everybody's always trying to normalize it, which is my issue now. It's like, why are you trying to normalize it? Why are you telling kids that it's okay to do this constantly? Because you even see it in schools, man. And I see it in school now too, where like it's a natural part of the behavior, Johnny. It's totally okay. I'm like, it's totally not. It might control you for the rest of your life and set you down on a downward spiral that no kid wants to go to. But it's almost like I kind of feel like there may be a conspiracy to emasculate society, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
However, I do think everything that you're talking about makes perfect sense. And I hope that all the guys listening to this can take some of that and be like, hey, you know what? Start your own journey, and obviously reach out to you as well. Right. And I'll add all the links. Don't worry, guys. I'll put all the links in the description below. But it is one of these things that we do need to talk more about and, really start to extrapolate these things piece by piece, because there's so much to learn and so much to uncover, because I feel like it's done purposefully.
Yeah. Well, porn-induced erectile dysfunction is something that's not when it'll happen, not if it'll happen, it's when. It will happen at some point. And I was forced to wake up because of this. Like you said, sometimes the deepest darkness brings forth the brightest light. But I was just as perplexed by these teachings as others. It's just I was open to it because I finally had a chance to resolve my ED holistically. And I was all over that. If I had had the teachings that I'm telling you now, when I had porn-induced ED, I would have been so grateful and I would have practiced them 100%. And so that's why I'm offering these to you now today. But semen retention, yeah, that's one of the most feared and misunderstood. I didn't understand it either, but now I do clearly. You know, it's a paradox. We actually think that we're getting less satisfaction because we're unable to release the semen. But actually what happens is we're getting, with our chi sexual energy and our dopamine levels returning to normal, and that energy returning to sexual areas of our body through, and along with the other like Kegels and other holistic modalities I offer, we're actually see increased sensitivity. We see increased sexual potency, increased performance, fuller embodiment in the act, as well as now we're able to prolong the experience sexually. Like, whereas before we're just simply reacting. We're just subconsciously releasing our semen after 3 to 5 minutes is the average. Men, I got to break it to you, but this is completely unsatisfying to women. I hear over and over again, women are in a different time scheme than us. They're actually just getting warmed up at the moment we subconsciously, unconsciously release our semen. And they are left with an experience that is totally unmet on every level. And it actually is going to sort of turn them away from feeling in love with you on every level, sexually, emotionally, mentally, because we're not honoring the woman. So this allows us now to be in control of our sexual performance. Now we're able to prolong it not only from 3 to 5 minutes, but to 30 or even 50 minutes. This is unheard of before, but now we're in control, and because we have increased potency. But probably the most important one of all for semen retention is we're avoiding the dopamine crash and the chi sexual energy crash and our overall chi energy, and the satiety and distancing that is completely poisonous and destructive to our relationships and to every aspect of our lives. So we're avoiding all that. And I want to say that these two, as I mentioned before, that simply by quitting pornography and practicing semen retention, these are the two most potent biohacks on the planet. Biohacking is reclaiming our vibrancy, vitality, and youthful vigor, and reversing biological aging. That's the definition of biohacking. We talk about, it's always based on superfoods or roots or shoots, or those are all good. I have biohacks that you never heard of that are so powerful in my book that we'll get into. But I want to be really, really clear here that the two most powerful biohacks on the planet, on the face of this earth, is restoring our neurology, dopamine levels, honoring that, and having healthy dopamine, drive, determination, and life, and then having healthy chi, sexual energy by, retaining our semen. And this launches us. This is the impetus which pushes us into vibrancy on every level. Not only our sexual health, we're able to transmute it into our sexual potency and health in life, but also fully embodiment in our relationships. And now we're able to have meaningful connective relationships, as well as, now we're able to work ardently in ways we never dreamed of on our physical fitness, which I know you're very passionate about too. Yeah. And I've been transmuting mine into that too. And we're able to transform our body, mind, and soul on every level. This is all interlinked. This is a holistic protocol on every level that starts with, yes, we'll overcome our ED this way, but it really affects every aspect of our life because it's all holistic. It's all interconnected.
Yeah, well, the whole body's intertwined, and I'll never understand the fact that they'll give you medicines knowing full well that it's going to wreak havoc in another department of the human body. I'm like, how does this make any sense? It's like, here, take Viagra. By the way, this might affect your heart negatively. It's like, wait, what? Or it's like, you might get headaches. And if they
and it'll cause, they don't tell you it'll cause diminishing and eventually failing results.
Exactly. Yeah, which is another thing. It's kind of like, wait, so you got to up the dosage? Perfect example of this was Oxycontin when I was looking into that with the whole Sackler family and Purdue Pharma. And they actually came out saying, we're like, well, if the Oxycontin is only 5 milligrams and it's not working, give them 10. Then it was give them 15. Then they came out with a 150 milligram tablet. I'm like, dear
Oh my
Lord, what are
God.
you guys doing? But
Well, they're selling a
that's
product, man. They're selling it. These are the richest institutions on earth. The pharmaceutical, the Western medicine, the pornography, and the insurance industries are the richest on earth.
100%, man. And it's for a reason. They want you coming back, which is when you talk about healing, that completely goes against like, whoa, whoa, whoa. We don't want any healing here. That's quackery.
That's what I want. I want to get into that next too,
Yeah.
about going to the lion's den of organic ED.
Let's talk about that right now. So tell us
All
more
right.
about the curing, because we're coming up on the. I think I'm gonna have you back on, Brooke.
Yeah. I want to get into some of these. So, how much more time do we have?
Oh, we got about 15 minutes, man.
Okay, I can fit it in. So, this is organic ED is the one we're hyper trained, hyper focused on by Western medicine on purpose. But actually, as I mentioned, Western medicine doesn't cure anything as far as either cardiovascular form of ED and arteriosclerosis, as well as hormonal. And those are really the two primary focuses on organic ED. I'll get into first cardiovascular because what I did is I asked the question, what is causing them to spend billions of dollars to make billions of dollars on nitric oxide inducing medications? How can we get to the root source of what's causing the nitric oxide dysfunction in the first place? So we're not dependent on surface symptom-based medicines. And we can actually produce it whenever and wherever we want. And that's what's so critical about what I'm offering in this book. And I hope everyone learns about this, is that we actually want to get to the root of the nitric oxide dysfunction if you do have cardiovascular dysfunction. And a lot of us are getting arteriosclerosis increasingly with our diets and with all the plastics. Plastic actually causes that. But there's actually, here's what causes arteriosclerosis, which causes ED, cardiovascular ED. It's a conglomeration of plaque buildup, heavy metals, and calcification that hardens. And this blocks our endothelial layer from being able to produce healthy nitric oxide levels naturally. But that's not the cause. Western medicine stuck on that, blaming the ambulance driver, so to speak. Our LDL cholesterol, they label it as bad, but it's actually antiviral, antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and anti-cancer. It's so healthy. It's produced in our liver as our body's only mode of protection against free radicals. And that's what I discovered is the source of arteriosclerosis is and ED from blood flow reduction. It's actually free radical damage. It's free radicals that cause oxidation and ravage our endothelial system. And the arteriosclerosis is actually a mode of protection that our body uses to try and deactivate it and to cover it up so it doesn't do more damage. So what are the sources of free radicals? So let's get it down to it. This is the solution to cardiovascular ED. Okay, there are four things. There's science is showing that heavy metals are a huge factor in arteriosclerosis, as well as animal-based diet. Animal-based diet is clearly a major contributor. It actually is loaded with saturated fats, carcinogens, and free radicals. Then there's also environmental pollutants. And actually, I was just mentioning, don't ever drink plastic. Be careful of plastic because microplastics are being shown to create arteriosclerosis. They are free radicals, and heavy metals are used in the process of making them, and they actually cross the blood-brain barrier and are hard to get out. And then the last one is smoking. So that's it. There's four. If you don't smoke, it's basically heavy metals, animal-based diet, and environmental pollutants. So the first one, which I in my process of discovery of learning and growth, I discovered was chelation IV therapy. This is calcium EDTA, and that's administered through intravenously. And it's amazing. All the studies around it show that it's incredibly effective at getting rid of heavy metals. And then plaque X IV therapy, it's phosphatidylcholine, or PC for short. It's soybean derived, natural. It gets rid of the plaque component of arteriosclerosis. And then the calcium EDTA also gets rid of the calcification part. So I actually, in case you're wondering, you don't believe the studies, the TACT-1 study and TACT-2 study, that's trial to assess chelation therapy it's a government study, showed a 51% reduction in cardiac events and a 43% reduction in mortality in patients with diabetes that had ED.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, it's unbelievable. And, there was a study of 22,765, showed an 87% market improvement in vascular disease. And they estimated because of that almost all of the bypass surgeries done in that year could have been entirely avoided and saved billions of dollars. There's billions of dollars that went in the pockets of these statins and surgeries.
Wow.
Yeah, but I did my own study. I did a ultrasound before and after a full course of calcium EDTA and plaque X. And I completely removed my mild arteriosclerosis in my carotid and aortic arteries. So the important thing to know is that we can this is a cure. This is really profound. There is a cure out there right now. It's just that Western medicine and pharmaceutical industries do not want us to know about this. And they are doing everything they can to keep this suppressed because it threatens the most richest institution on earth, which is statins sales. It's the highest grossing on earth in world history. So we have to demand this. We have to continue to support naturopaths, but we can actually get rid of the arteriosclerosis, but then we have to prevent it from continuing. So we have to watch any further sources of heavy metals, of environmental pollutants, but also our diet. We need to change our diet because that diet is not optimizing masculine health, even though everyone wants these corporations want to brainwash you into thinking that eating meat is what men eat. But, I recommend a plant-based diet. I recommend, but not just any old plant-based diet, because we can actually be total junk food. We could eat pizza all day long and be plant-based. We can be totally obese doing that. So what I recommend is like a light force diet. So what that is, it's very simple. It's just, organic vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and nuts and seeds. That's it. And at first that might scare you. You think, oh, again, it's these paradoxes because our neurology, we think that this is not going to satisfy us, but our brains are so plastic and our body's so resilient. Our neural pathways actually change shortly after, and we actually appreciate and crave the nutrients we're getting from this light force diet. We feel better. We don't feel numbed anymore from, eating this kind of diet, as well as the next thing I recommend is, I don't know if you do this, but it's intermittent fasting.
Oh yeah. Prolonged fasting. Yeah. I love that. Yeah.
Nice. So that's actually another, these chelations and the plaque X IVs. And the other IVs I recommend in my book, like NAD and antioxidants like glutathione. These are all powerful biohacks. In fact, intravenous medicine is becoming the fastest growing segment of naturopathic medicine and is really the wave of the future. Intermittent fasting is another biohack. It actually is regenerative. It burns fat during the first 12 to 18 hours. And then after 18 hours, the actual anti-aging part is where it goes into autophagy, where we burn off misshapen cellular components and diseases like neurodegenerative diseases and cardiovascular disease, cancers. We're actually start burning that off as we stress ourselves a little bit more. And, people go, oh my God, I can't imagine not losing one meal a day, which is basically giving up one meal.
Yeah.
But you're actually able to completely control and modify your body shape this way. And I'll let you get into that too, but maybe you want to talk about that and then we can get into the hormonal aspect.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you when it comes to IF and prolonged fasting. I remember the first book I ever read on that was, it was called Eat, Stop, Eat by Brad Pillon way back in the day. Turns out that he had worked in the supplement industry. And he was talking about how he's like these fat burners and this other stuff that, he's selling. He kind of felt like a drug dealer, right? Because he came across some old literature somewhere that was, hidden. And it basically just said, well, you're better off just not eating to lose fat. What a concept. And you
Yeah.
looked into the
Yeah.
subject of autophagy too. And sure enough, you combine it with green tea and other things like apple cider vinegar, and it just helps to really burn fat at a way faster rate. And
Mhm.
I think this probably grown in popularity quite a bit in the past couple of years as well, but it's still not at the forefront the way it should be because a lot of these diet companies, it doesn't matter, pick one, they want you to buy their product. They don't want to tell you anything about omission. Omission is the way to go for a lot
Mhm.
of the stuff that you just mentioned. Like
It's
we have
free and it doesn't make anyone any money,
exactly.
but
And
it
it's like,
benefits our masculine health.
oh, 100%. And the thing is, it's kind of like you can feel the difference too, man. I mean, when you lose 60 pounds versus being overweight, you feel it in your rectal health too. The quality isn't what it
Mhm.
should be. All
Mhm.
that stuff ties in, but let's jump into the next part. Uh,
Yeah, because I want to leave enough time to talk about. I know you wrote a book on penile growth, on
yeah.
lingam growth, and I kind of found a couple little things to add to that. And I want you to talk about your experience with that. But hormones, real quick, the other major aspect of organic ED is hormone levels. And that's simple, that's easy. What I found is bioidentical pellet testosterone replacement therapy. And a lot of people think this is just for aging men, but we're actually seeing such a hormonal imbalance with the plastics and diets today, from dairy, from meat, that we're seeing with younger men now. So bioidentical pellet testosterone replacement therapy is the most natural form of mimicking our biology of our hormones as closely as possible. And that's inserted, little pellets are inserted under your skin, and you replace it every 3 to 4 months, forget all about it. But what it does, it's an incredibly powerful biohack. It increases your energy levels overall. And the funny thing is that we think that it's actually used as a monotherapy for mild ED. And we think that these things are isolated just sexual area alone, but that's not how it works. Actually, we get an increased energy in our overall physical body, in our overall
Mhm.
body. And that in turn gives us more energy sexually. They're completely inseparable and they're completely interlinked. But anyways, it also burns fat, builds lean muscle mass, improves moods. And another thing that I recommend in conjunction with this, because it's incredibly, what it does is it burns red blood cells. It adds to our red blood cell levels. So it's very simple. What we do is, and I recommend this not to people, just people doing TRT, but also to anyone, and this is a biohack that's incredibly powerful that you never heard of, and that's donating blood regularly. Not only
What?
does it help people in need that are possibly dying or sick, but this is a powerful regenerative biohack, an anti-aging biohack. And what it does is it actually it lowers our blood viscosity and pressure. It lowers our iron and oxidant levels, which are linked with many different types of diseases. And it actually changes the cell messengers that are being told to our cells that now we have a youthful cell messenger. So our body, literally, the latest science is showing that donating blood, whole blood, as often as you can, when they allow, I recommend going in whenever they schedule you, go right back in. This actually, the science is showing it is, you can literally see it, anti-aging effects of it.
Wow. I've never heard of that one.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. And now I will say what I've experienced is when I donate blood, the first few days, I might see a little drop in my sexual performance, but
Yeah.
it shoots way back higher over time, because basically you're changing the consistency of your blood, and blood flow is so important to optimal sexual function as men.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so this is just like changing the oil on a car, this is so regenerative. Basically, we're completely regenerating all new blood cells that have been taken out, all new white blood cells, platelets, and plasma. It's regeneration. And this renewal and regeneration is what is so powerful, because now we have these young, pliable cells. This is a biohack. It's just that
100%.
and did you know also that this is incredible? This saves lives. Donating blood saves our own lives. If we have cardiovascular disease, it's been shown that just one donation per year of blood, takes you half an hour, will reduce the chance of heart attack by 88%.
What?
And that's on AMA site. I'm not making that up. Yeah. I know.
Advertised.
Hey,
Like,
man,
why don't we?
we need to wake up. I mean, like, these things are not being stated to us because, as I said, this is all money driven. We need to wake up that these corporations do not have our best masculine health interest in mind. They do not care if we are ill, sick, in disease, or feeling bad. They don't care if we suffer from side effects. They do not care. The only people that care are ourselves. We have to look out for ourselves. And these teachings, you can research yourself. I have 111 studies in my paperback and hardback that are firsthand scientific studies to back all this up. Scientists are trying to raise the red flags on this, but of course, these powerful industries have disinformation campaigns. They do not want this to come out. I hope to God that this changes and that we can have a future where natural holistic healing is the first line of defense, and that surgeries and pharmaceuticals are just in emergencies, not the first line of defense. Yeah. And certainly not for the rest of our lives.
I sure hope not, because the other thing about energy healing, like I did one recently, and I went in there with back pain. I'd strained my back. It was unrelated. I had already scheduled on a Friday, and I'd strained my back on Wednesday. Long story short, I came out of the energy healing, and on Wednesday, it was weird, like even to this day, where I'm like, my back feels fine. I couldn't understand it, man. I'm like, I don't understand how this ties into what just happened. You know, I had like a severe muscle strain, and it was gone. And a lot of people might see that as crazy, woo-woo, whatever. But I think we have to start exploring other options, because if they're working, there might be something to it, you know. And it doesn't matter whether it's like where it comes from, like whether it's Eastern medicine, Vedic medicine. It doesn't really. I'm like, why don't we try to explore that more from a scientific perspective? You know, do some studies, and then you can kind of verify it with a study and say, hey, you know what? It actually works.
Well, it's not the little pill or the Band-Aid or the antibiotic cream that heals us. It's actually that regenerative power, that light of God, that healing, the natural holistic healing that's in every cell of our body that heals us. It's actually us that heals. We need to realize that. They don't have the power to heal us with just a pill or just the short-term solutions they have. And like you said, we need to actually discover the holistic ways of healing ourselves. And that could be all natural. That is the only way to heal, is naturally. These recent discoveries in pharmaceuticals and surgeries, they're just temporary fixes. They're meant to be bridges towards us turning around the underlying causes, our behavioral decisions.
Yeah. And it's kind of, to me, I would love to see modern society get to a place where, you know what, this is common knowledge versus, hey, you know what, I gotta have, or the fact that, you know, you and I have this podcast, you and I can talk about this, but it's almost like people really got to dig through the trenches. Like, we got to sift through a whole mound of crap before we find that little nugget of gold. And when we do, it's totally worth it. But I want to live in a society where my sons can just be like, oh, you know, I opened whatever Times magazine or something. They're talking about the importance of semen retention. You know, like, I want that. I want our society to evolve or get to that place. And I hope that eventually we can, man. Like, I hope that it's a possibility in our lifetime.
Yeah. Well, do we have a few minutes to talk about penile growth?
Yeah, let's talk about it right now, man. We got 10 minutes.
You're an expert in that. So what I've discovered is, you know, when you're taking, when you're doing pellet TRT, they recommend doing HCG. That's a holistic way of still getting your luteinizing element where you produce testosterone in your testicles, and this keeps you fertile. And this is really a well-balanced approach. The latest science is really showing that you should really approach testosterone therapy from all avenues. You don't want to just ignore that element of this luteinizing hormone. And so HCG, what that does is it actually allows us to produce that, continue to produce that. It protects our fertility, so we're still fertile. But the latest science is showing that it actually increases the length of our lingam and our testicle size. And so when we combine that with semen retention, which increase chi sexual energy to that area of our body, along with fitness, along with Kegels, doing sit-ups, doing Kegels, which are specifically all the muscles surrounding our lingam, from our anus to our lingam. And when we also look into things like platelet-rich plasma, and we can even, if you have enough money, you could even do stem cell. All these techniques combined, but especially semen retention is integral, foundation. We can definitely increase the size of our lingam. And I want to actually hear from you because you wrote a whole book on this. So I wanted to team up and tell men how they can increase the size of their lingam and their overall sexual health naturally.
Well, the first thing you got to do is, and I talked about it for myself, is when you do PE, the most important thing is the semen release, like we talked about before. Like that's the worst thing you can do, because what happens is you'll start turtling up. And you'll start turtling up more and more, and you're just going to kind of go within, because that refractory period, you're constantly in that, which is not what you want to do. But you could always start off with just some basic stretches, right? So you just kind of make that okay sign, just stretch it out, hold it in different directions, 30 to 90 seconds. Then there's jelqing, which is a great exercise that you can do as well, where you basically 70 to 80% erect, and you kind of just, stroke it down, start and go down to the glands, make sure it's lubricated. And you want to just hold that, whether it's for girth or whatever. The other manual exercise that I would recommend is edging. However, edging is basically, you want to stimulate yourself to have a full erection. You're supposed to emulate what it's like to have intercourse. And this is why this is one of those things where I'm like, hey, if you're on thin ice or you have porn addiction, don't do it. Because a lot of these guys will just use that as an excuse to just basically, start masturbating. And then it's like, oh, what you do? I ended up releasing again.
Edging is a great way to really wreak havoc on your dopamine, along with, a lot of people love polygamy these days, polyamory, and that's actually a major dopamine hit too. That wreaks havoc on the dopamine levels, because there's jealousy, there's edging, there's all these crazy, dopamine kicks going on.
I don't know why, but that's taken off. And I was even watching a guy talk about,
I think it's correlated with the porn epidemic. That's my theory.
I think so, along with being unfaithful, all those different things, they tie in, man. And
also female empowerment. There's a sort of, women, feel it's time to express themselves sexually, orgasm, multiple partners, and that's fine, but it's not my gig. I want to build not only sexual potency, but full embodiment, and physically, and also in my relationship connections. I want to be able to optimize my masculine health on every level, because being a man doesn't just include getting hard and getting up. Yeah, we want to have that, but it's also being optimal physical shape, as well as being a man that's capable of having an intimate, connective, beautiful relationship with the woman of your dreams.
Which is, the thing is for me, and a lot of people might come under fire for this, but nowadays there's a lot of different deviations as far as, what's right and what's wrong, and, morality, this, that, and the other. But what I will say that for me, what matrimony or what marriage means for me is, that perfect bond of masculine and feminine energy coming together, the yin yang, as above, so below, all these different things that always tie into that perfect balance. You can't find that. I believe you can't find that outside of a man and a woman coming together, two come together to become one. The fact that, everything a baby has to basically go through, or that whole process of creation, basically, it's like from the sperm going to the egg, and that everything that happens afterwards, man, that's miraculous to me. It's just, that's the whole purpose of that energy coming together. You're creating life.
That's why we release our semen. But we don't need to do it when we are engaged in recreational sex 99.9% of the time.
Exactly. There is a purpose behind it. And that's the other thing too that I learned through Tantra. I talked to a couple of Tantric practitioners, and they were basically saying, like, dude, you could have mind-blowing orgasms. The orgasm isn't necessarily about the ejaculation. It's not necessarily about the release. And that kind of made me think, I'm like, is there any truth to that, any validity? And there is, man. And if anything, it kind of it enhances the sexual experience too, which I found to be strange because I'm like, well, I figured, this would just make me bust faster. But it's weird because it got my mind more involved, it got my spirit more involved, and my energy just felt better, when I was engaging in, intercourse. So there's nothing mysterious about it. It's just something that's helpful. It's a tool in the same vein as semen retention, where it's like, this is helpful for you and it can enhance your life. Or you can totally waste it on, a bunch of pixels on the screen constantly. And next thing you got no energy. You feel lethargic. You're addicted to video games. You're not going anywhere fast. And you'll never say that you have an addiction because you're like, I go to work, I do this. But it's like, well, hold the phone. Maybe you have an issue that if you looked into it, took care of it, maybe your life would change.
Well, we need to be real honest that semen retention is a massive cure for energetic ED, which is probably the largest, it's the predominant form of ED today in combination with pornography addiction. These are the elephants in the room that nobody wants to talk about: pornography and semen release. These are major predominant sources of ED today for millions of men. Yeah. So let's just be honest that nobody's wanting to talk about it because we think, hey, it's macho to watch pornography. It's macho to release semen because that's the way we're taught in Western culture. But we need to open up to other ways of seeing things and see for yourself the results, because, eventually you don't want to end up like me, where you're so terrified trying to make a resolution on how to recover your vibrant sexual health again naturally. Yeah. I'm testimony that this is what happens. Millions of men are experiencing these forms of ED right now. This is real. So I know that some men don't want to look at this, but you need to have an open mind, because you don't want to get to the point where you're experiencing ED and then you're forced to deal with it. You want to be proactive and be open to these teachings, because I was unfamiliar with them too. I had ED. I'm just like you. I was addicted to pornography. I was addicted to semen release. Mm-hmm. But look at me now. My life is transformed. We actually become happier beings when we engage in this. We don't lose anything. We gain everything. That's the whole illusion. We think that we're losing, that we're giving up, that we're not fitting in. Man, you fit in better. You gain everything. You gain connection on every level, intimately, sexually, success in life, your mind, your emotions, your neurology, your physical fitness. Everything transforms once you simply start with quitting two things. Very simple: quit pornography and quit semen release. And then practice these other healing modalities too. Prevent, enhance your blood flow, your hormonal levels. Prevent that in the future. This is all preventative for major forms of ED that is causing suffering to millions, possibly even billions of men right now.
Yeah. Yep. No, 100% true. But Brooke, with that being said, you got any other closing words?
No, I just want to say real quick, check out my book, because I talk about IV, for NAD, which boosts energy levels. It's another incredible anti-aging. It literally increases the length of our telomeres, which is our DNA strands. Yeah. It's amazing what we have. The biohacks available. Just open yourself up, man. Open yourself up in life. That's all. Let go. It's just letting go and opening yourself up, and the world will open up for you. My book is, as I mentioned, it's on my own YouTube channel, free. My audiobook is free on there. Brooke Hazen, You Are Not Broken, as well as my website. You can click on that YouTube free audiobook on brookehazen.com. And my paperback, soon to be hardback and Kindle, are on Amazon. Brooke Hazen, You Are Not Broken.
Perfect. And I will make sure I put all the links in the description below. Brooke, it was an absolute honor, but I have to have you back, man.
Oh yeah, definitely. We can chat more. That would be great to just kind of like slow things down and get into things in a little more depth.
Yeah, definitely, man. Because I still got more questions. So
good. Yeah, we could go into it. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me on, CJ. It's been such a pleasure.
Hey, man, I had an absolute blast. And for all you guys listening, I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. Until the next episode.